B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Beitza Daf Daled. We're going to start 16 lines from the top of the Omid. Says the Gemara Tanya. We saw in the Mishnah on Daf Beis that a Beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai say one's allowed to eat it, and Beis Hillel say one is not allowed to eat it. And we had a shaila in the Gemara, according to Rav Nachman, it's talking about that the hen was muktzah, and so is the egg, and then it's a machlekes whether we hold of muktzah, we don't hold of muktzah. We had Rabbi of Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok who said that we're not talking about muktzah, the hen is actually one that was designated to be eaten, and therefore it's not muktzah. And the question is, if it's not muktzah, why does Beis Hillel say you shouldn't eat it? According to Rabbi, it's talking about if there was a Shabbos the day before, and then there's a Gzeris HaKosov, a posuk from where we learn that Yom Tov meals must not be prepared on Shabbos the day before, and since the egg was laid on Yom Tov, it was finished being prepared by Hashem, but it was finished being prepared on the day before Yom Tov, and therefore you're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov because it was on Shabbos. And Rav Yosef and Rabbi Yitzchok say that even if it's a regular Yom Tov, not a Yom Tov after Shabbos, nonetheless there's a Gzeira, either Otu Peris Shenoshru or Mashkin Shezovu. So now we're going to find another brisa discussing this halacha. Tanya achirim or imrim mishum Rabbi Eliezer. It was said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that beitza, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov, toichal, you can eat the egg, hi va'ima. Not only the egg, you can also eat the hen, the mother of this egg. Asks the Gemara, b'mai oskinon. What are we talking about here? What type of hen are we talking about? Are we talking about a Tarnagoles, which is not muktzah? And if the hen is not muktzah, then there's no chiddush that you're allowed to eat the hen, the mother. It's not muktzah. The whole discussion would only be regarding the egg. Whether there's hachona de Rabbi, if it was a Yom Tov after Shabbos, whether there's a gezerah because of noilad, is it like peres shenoshru, is it like mayim shezovu? But for the hen itself, the hen is not muktzah. Why are you telling us that pshita is poshut that the hen is allowed to be eaten? That not only is the egg allowed to be eaten, but even the mother is allowed to be eaten. Why do you have to tell me about the mother? It suffices to tell us that the egg is allowed to be eaten, conforming with Beis Shammai, who says that in Beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov you're allowed to eat the egg. But why are you adding in here that you can eat the hen? The hen wasn't muktzah. Answers the Gemara, Elo b'tarnagoles ho'imedes legadel beitzim. It's talking about a hen that was designated to lay eggs, and therefore the hen itself is muktzah. And we know that Rabbi Eliezer, we see this in other places, we're going to see this later on Daf Lamed Daled, Rabbi Eliezer holds of muktzah. He's not one of those who say that there's no issue of muktzah. Rabbi Eliezer holds of muktzah. And then the question is that hi va'imo asura. Then both the mother and the hen and the egg should both be muktzah. How can you say that Rabbi Eliezer says beitza toichal hi ve'ima, that you're allowed to eat it? You're not allowed to eat it. They're muktzah. Omer Reb Zera says Reb Zera, what the brisa means when it says according to Rabbi Eliezer that toichal hi ve'ima, it doesn't mean you can eat the egg and you can eat the hen. No, toichal agav ima, which means that in the event that we're talking about a type of chicken, a type of hen that you're allowed to eat, only then you're allowed to eat the egg as well. And if in the event that you're not allowed to eat the mother, you're not allowed to eat the hen, the egg. Hey Chadomi, what are we talking about? What does that mean? Either the hen is muktzah, or the hen is not muktzah. Either the hen is designated to lay eggs, and then it's muktzah, or it's designated to be eaten, and then it's not muktzah. What does it mean that the egg can be eaten agav ima only because the mother can be eaten? What sort of circumstance are we talking about? Omar Abaya, kagoin shelok chostam. If somebody bought a hen without having a specific intention of what he's going to do with it, is he going to use it to lay eggs? Is he going to use it to eat? And then what's going to determine the status of the hen, whether it's muktzah or not? What will determine it is what you do with it. Nishchata, if you're going to shecht the hen, then huvrara, then it will become clear that this hen is for food and it's not muktzah. Huvrara de la'achila imedes, then it's clear that it wasn't muktzah, that this hen was designated to be eaten, and then And then obviously the egg will also be mutter. Lo nishchata, if you don't shech the hen, then huvara, it will become clear that the legadel beitza medes, then that you have this hen in order for it to lay eggs, and then it's muktzah. And in that case, the egg will not be allowed to be eaten. So when the Brisa says beitza is toichal hiva ima, is telling us that in the event and when it becomes clear that what the mother was designated for, then you'll know what the status is with the egg. Continues the Gemara. Rav Mori Omar. Rav Mori says guzma ketoni. Rav Mori says no. We're not talking about a hen that was bought without any specific intention. No, it was bought specifically to be used as food, and it's not muktzah. And indeed, the whole chiddush is only regarding the egg. That even though it's not muktzah, there's other issues. There's hachona issues. There's mashkin she zovu. There's peiros shenoshru. There's other issues. But with the mother, with the hen, there's no issue whatsoever. So we asked a question before, so why does it say that you can eat it hi va'ima? So he says guzma katoni. It's just like a type of exaggeration. The Brisa was so adamant, Rabbi was so adamant and insistent to prove that the hen is not muktzah, that he says you can eat the egg and you can eat the egg's mother. It's all not muktzah. The Tanya. With this concept that we would sometimes add on unnecessary and sometimes even inaccurate details just in order to impress on us the halacha, we saw in the Brisa, the Tanya, Achirim Oimrim, Mishum Rebbe Eliezer, Beitza Toichal, this egg can be eaten, you can eat it, Ve'imo, and its mother, Ve'efroyach, and a chick, Ve'kliposoi, and the shell holding the chick. Asks the Gemara, My kliposoi, what does it mean that you can eat the shell? Ile meklipo mamash, does it mean actually eating the shell? Klipo bas achilohi, can you eat the shell of an egg? You can't eat the shell of a chick, the shell of an egg. Elo efroyach b'klipose, what it means is that not only can you eat the hen, you can eat the egg, but even if chick inside the egg, you can eat it as well. When the chick is still inside the egg. That also can't be what the Brisa means when it says the klipo. Why? Because ad kan pligi, the whole machleikus in the Brisa, whether you're allowed to eat this chick or not, is Rabbon ad kan pligi Rabbanon Aleja B'Lezer Ben Yaakov Elo heicha de yotza la'avira olam. Only when the chick was born, so to speak, when it was already hatched, then there's a machleikus: are you allowed to eat it? Are you not allowed to eat it? Aval heicha de lo yotza la'avira olam. But in the case where the chick is still inside the egg, lo pligi, everyone agrees that it's also you're not allowed to eat the chick. So what does it mean when the Brisa says that you can eat the efroyach and the chick and the kliposoi? Elo efroyach v'kliposoi dugma guzma. This that the Brisa says that you can eat the efroyach, the chick, and you can eat the shell, the peel, is guzma. It's just an exaggeration. We're not talking about that the efroyach is still in the klipa. No, it was born, it was hatched, and according to Rebbe Eliezer, you're allowed to eat it. And when it says klipa, it means the peels. Even though you can't eat it, you can't eat the shells of an egg. But it just adds on all the extra, as much as you can, just add it on the list to impress on us that the egg and all that's involved with this egg is not muktzah and is allowed to be eaten. So too in our Brisa that we're discussing here, when it says you can eat the egg and you can eat the mother, the chick, the hen, it's just a guzma. It doesn't really need to say it, because since we're talking about a hen which is designated as food to be eaten, it goes without saying that it's not muktzah, and there's no reason in the world one shouldn't be able to eat it. And this whole discussion about a chick that was not yet hatched and the various stages of this chick, when one isn't allowed to eat it, we're going to discuss that later on Daf Yomi Shiur. Continues the Gemara. Itmar. And now we're embarking on a sugya where there's going to be 3 halachas, all involving shitas Rav, and they're going to be discussing when you have 2 days next to each other, how one day influences a different day. And you have this either a Shabbos and a Yom Tov next to each other, and we've already touched on this a little bit. When you have a Shabbos after a Yom Tov or a Yom Tov after a Shabbos, then there's issues when an egg, for example, is laid on the Yom Tov after a Shabbos, since it finished getting prepared the day before on the Shabbos inside the chick, inside the hen, then there's an issue according to Rabbi of Hachona de Rabbi. And so there, the 2 days being next to each other influence each other. We have a regular 2-day Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. How do they influence each other? And we have a 2-day Rosh Hashanah, where even in Eretz Yisrael you keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah, and how do they influence each other? And that's going to be the topic of the next sugya. Says the Gemara Itmar, Shabbos v'Yom Tov, when you have a Shabbos and a Yom Tov next to each other. So there's Machlokes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Omar noildo b'zeh asura b'zeh. That if this egg, if it was, that means the day that the egg was laid, of course you're not allowed to eat it. But even the day afterwards, you're not allowed to eat it. So if you've got a Shabbos and a Yom Tov next to each other, and the egg was laid on the first of the two, you're not allowed to eat it on the second of the two either. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, noildo b'zeh muteres b'zeh. Rabbi Yochanan says it's okay. If it was born on the first day, then on that day it's a Beitza shenoildo, you're not allowed to eat it. On the next day, you're allowed to eat it. So the Gemara is suggesting, Neima kasova Rav, kedusha achasi. Could it be that Rav, who says noildo b'zeh, asura b'zeh, is because Rav holds when you have a Shabbos and Yom Tov next to each other, we view it as being a single long day of kedusha, day of Issa Melocha, and since it's considered as one kedusha, therefore, when it says Beitza Shenoildo b'Yom Tov, it means the whole 48 hours of kedusha that is considered the day that the egg was laid, and therefore is osa. The Gemara says that can't be. V'Omar Rav, Rav said explicitly, Halacha karboz keinim v'alibud Rabbi Eliezer, that the halacha is like those 4 elders in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, the Omar Shtei Kedusha Hein, who says that they are considered as 2 separate kedushos. And we've already discussed previously, the halachic ramification of that would be, are you allowed to have a separate Eruv for each day? If you want to go outside the Tchum, can you put an Eruv in the Mizrach for the first day and an Eruv in the Ma'ariv for the second day? If it's 1 Kedusha, you can't. If it's 2 Kedushas, you can. Elahocha, so if they're not arguing, if even Rav holds it's 2 Kedushas, why does Rav say that an egg that was laid on one day is not allowed to be eaten even the next day? They're arguing in the topic of Hachana D'Rabba that we saw before. Rav Isli Hachana D'Rabba. Rav says that a meal of Shabbos or Yom Tov is not allowed to be prepared the day before. And therefore, if an egg is laid on the first of these 2 days, then it's not allowed to be used to be eaten on the second of the 2 days. Rabbi Yochanan Leslie Hachana D'Rabba. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold of Hachana D'Rabba, and therefore, if there's no Hachana D'Rabba, there's no reason in the world not to eat the egg the day after it was laid. And even though we saw in the previous Gemara that if an egg is laid on one day, then actually it was finished the day before. Over here we're talking about Yom Tov after Shabbos, and the egg was laid on Shabbos, so when was it actually finished being prepared? On Friday. So why should Hachana D'Rabba be an issue about not eating it on Sunday, which is Yom Tov? So Tosfos asks that, and Tosfos says that it's true that what we said before, that the primary hachana of the egg is the day before it was laid. But the laying itself is also a type of hachana. It's also a type of preparation for a meal that you can later make with this egg. And therefore, if it was actually laid on a Shabbos, it's going to be asa on the Yom Tov, on the Sunday after it. That's one answer, in which case it's an Issa Min HaTorah, Gzeira D'Rabba. And the second answer, Tosfos says, is virtue of the fact that it was laid on Shabbos and not laid on Sunday. Had it been laid on Sunday, which is Yom Tov, it would be Issa Min HaTorah because it would have then been prepared on Shabbos, Hachana D'Rabba. So virtue of the fact that it was laid on Shabbos and then it was just prepared on Friday, that alone is going to allow it to be eaten on Sunday. That in itself is considered a hachana from Shabbos to Yom Tov, and therefore is an issue, and then it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan. Those are the 2 explanations of Tosfos to answer this problem. Continues the Gemara Ketanoi. This discussion here of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan we see in the Tanoim. Noildo b'Shabbos, toichel b'Yom Tov. If an egg was laid on Shabbos, you're allowed to eat it on Sunday, which is Yom Tov. B'Yom Tov, toichel b'Shabbos. If it was laid on Yom Tov, on a Friday, you're allowed to eat it on the day after, on Shabbos. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. Adayin hi machlokes. It's not so clear. It's a machlokes. Shebeis Shammai omrim toichel, ubeis Hillel omrim lo toichel. According to Beis Shammai, you're allowed to eat it on the day after, and according to Beis Hillel, you're not allowed to eat it on the day after. And exactly what the machlokes is b'Shammai and b'Hillel, and is it and how all this works is a discussion in the Mefarshim here. But that is the basic pshat in the Gemara. That according to Beis Shammai, in the same way as it's mutter to be eaten on the day it was laid, it's mutter to be eaten the day after it was laid. And Beis Hillel say that the same reason it's also to eat it the day it was laid, it's also to eat it the day after it was laid. Continues the Gemara. Ushpizchinei der Rav Ada B'Ahava, the host, the place where Rav Ada B'Ahava was staying, he had these eggs that were laid on Yom Tov, which was on a Friday, and now he wanted to know what's with Shabbos. Also, the host came to Rav Ada B'Ahava, and Omalei asked him, what's the halacha le'atvinhu ha'idna? Today on Yom Tov, which is Friday, I understand I can't eat them. Beitza shenilda b'Yom Tov, Beis Hillel say lo teichel. So I can't eat them. Are they muktzah? Or no, maybe I just can't eat them, but I can roast them today. I can tzoil them, I can prepare them today on Yom Tov. You're allowed to do that. Ha'idna v'nichlinu l'mocha, and I'll eat them tomorrow on Shabbos. And tomorrow, it wasn't laid tomorrow, so if it was laid today, you're allowed to eat it tomorrow. The problem is it's Shabbos, so tomorrow I can't prepare it because of Hilchos Shabbos. Can I prepare it in advance today? Omerli. So Rav Ada B'Ahava said to this person who asked him the question, "My daitich, you're taking it for granted that tomorrow you're allowed to eat it. You're just asking me, am I allowed to prepare it today? But you're taking it for granted you can eat it the next day." Rav Yechanan alochak Rabbi Yechanan. It seems that you've taken it for granted that since we saw it was a machlokes before whether if an egg was laid on Yom Tov, are you allowed to eat it on the day after on Shabbos? If it was laid on Friday, which is Yom Tov, can you eat it on Shabbos? You're taking it for granted you can eat it on Shabbos. You're just asking me, can I prepare it on Friday? Why are you taking that for granted? Because Rav Rabbi Yechanan alochak Rabbi Yechanan. Whenever Rav and Rabbi Yechanan are arguing, the aloch is like Rabbi Yechanan. And Rabbi Yechanan said a few lines earlier that Neilda b'zeh, muteres b'zeh. Is that true? Is that what you're understanding? You're right. But look well into what Rabbi Yechanan actually holds. Afilu Rabbi Yechanan lo kashari elo legoim o lemocher. Rabbi Yechanan only said that if the egg was born or was laid on Yom Tov, which was Erev Shabbos, then on Shabbos you're allowed to eat it. You can't cook it on Shabbos, but you can swallow it. You can swallow it raw. That's called, you can only the next day, you can swallow it that way. Avol b'yomi, but the day that it was laid, which was the Friday, which was Yom Tov, loy, not only are you not allowed to eat it, you're not even allowed to touch it. It's muktzah, and you're not allowed to even prepare it. Proof to that is in a brayso. V'otani we learned in a brayso, achas beitza shenilda b'Shabbos, v'achas beitza shenilda b'Yom Tov, ein metaltelin oisa. The day that an egg was laid, if it was Shabbos or Yom Tov, not only are you not allowed to eat it, you're not even allowed to move it. Lo lechasis bo'es hakli, not in order to cover a little utensil with it, v'lo lismich bo karei hamita, nor to lean anything on these eggs. You're not allowed to touch these eggs at all. Continues the Gemara, ushpizchinei der Rav Papa, the host where Rav Papa was staying, v'omilo hahu gavra, and some say it was just an individual. The osele kamei der Rav Papa came before Rav Papa. Havale hanoch beitzim mishabbos liyom tov. He had these eggs that were laid on Shabbos, and the question was, what do we do now with Yom Tov? Osele kamei. So they came before Rav Papa, Omalei, and asked him, ma'ol michlin hu lemochar. We understand that on Shabbos, when these eggs were actually laid, we're not allowed to eat them, even without cooking them. Cooking, of course you can't cook on Shabbos, but even just to swallow them raw, we're not allowed to, because it was laid today. The question is, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow Sunday is Yom Tov. This is the very question we're discussing. Omerli. So Papa told this person, Zil ha'idna, go, leave me today. Don't ask me this question today. The Sola Mochor, come back tomorrow and ask me the question. The Rav, because Rav Moika Amira Ilave Miyoim Tov Lechavrei, because Rav was used to, from the Yom Tov meal, whenever he ate his Yom Tov meal until the next day, he would not give a drasha in the shul. He was used to halachic rulings in his drasha, and he used to have a translator, somebody who would say over what he was saying, called an Amira, a speaker, so to speak. To say over, he would speak more gently and quietly. He would have somebody with a loud enough voice that would relay what he's saying to the public, and he wouldn't give such a drasha after a Yom Tov meal, because of the wine that he drank, he was slightly maybe intoxicated or not completely with a clear mind, and one is not allowed to answer halachic rulings in such a state. Mishum shikrus, because of the shikrus, because of the alcohol in the wine. The following day, this person came back to Rav Papa. Omar Le, and Rav Papa said to him, Iku hashta ishtali. Had I answered you yesterday, I would have made a mistake because I had forgotten. There was something I forgot. I would have told you yesterday that Rav Rabbi Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Yochanan, that when you have a machlekes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan, and you can eat the egg on Yom Tov, because Rabbi Yochanan said before, as we saw earlier on in the sugya, Noel da bezeh, muteres bezeh. But it's not the truth. Ha'amar Rav said, Hilchas sekavasei de Rav behani tlas. Because in three halachos that we're discussing here, the halacha is not like the general rule like Rabbi Yochanan, rather the halacha is like Rav. Bein nekula, bein nechumra. In halacha number 2, it's going to, which we haven't learned yet, it's going to be a kula. In halacha number 1 and halacha number 3, it's actually going to be a chumra. Halacha number 1 we've already learned, and that is when you have Shabbos and Yom Tov next to each other, that Rav said, as we saw at the beginning of the sugya, Noelda bezeh, Asura bezeh, as we said before, because Rav holds of Hachana de Rabbah, and therefore one's not allowed to eat an egg on Yom Tov that was laid on Shabbos, or vice versa. So that was that first halacha, and that is what Rav Papa said. Continues the Gemara, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Eitzim shenoshru min hadekel b'Shabbos. If you had woods that fell off a tree on Shabbos, when Shabbos came in, they were on the tree. Now they'd fallen off. The question is, now on Sunday it's going to be Yom Tov. Are you allowed to use these woods that were muktzah, that were on the tree when Shabbos came in? On Shabbos they fell off. Are you allowed to use them for firewood on Yom Tov the next day? Also, Lasikon Rabbi Yochanan said you're not allowed to use them Yom Tov the next day. The question is, Rabbi Yochanan said that even if you're going to say that Eitzim Shenoshru is compared somewhat to Beitza Shenolda, but Rabbi Yochanan said that in the beginning of the sugya, Nolda bezeh, muteres bezeh. So why over here is he not allowed to use these woods on Sunday, which is Yom Tov? It says Rabbi Yochanan ve'al tashiveni beitza. And don't ask me a contradiction to what I ruled regarding the egg, that one would be allowed to use an egg that laid on Shabbos on Yom Tov on Sunday. My Tama. He explains as follows: Beitza, the Beitza de biyoyma loichazya legoyma, v'loy koshorile. Sorry, Beitza mishum de biyoyma nami chazya legoyma, v'loy koshorile ad lemochor. Meiti yidia de bas yoyma asro. Because when it comes to an egg, there's no issa intrinsically. It's not one of the lamates melachis not to swallow this egg on Shabbos. Why we're not allowed to swallow this egg on Shabbos? Everybody will know, because it's an egg that was laid on the day it was laid. You're not allowed to eat it. It's muktzah or any other reasons that we've discussed. So, and then they'll know that the same would be true were this egg to have been laid tomorrow on Yom Tov. The same thing would apply. You're not allowed to eat it on Yom Tov. And because there's no reason to blame the Issa on the fact that it's Shabbos more than the fact that it's Yom Tov. There's a halacha, Beitza Shenolda is awesome. However, Eitzim, when it comes to these woods, that on Shabbos is nothing to do with the fact that it was Noilad, it's nothing to do with Muktzah, it's nothing to do with any of these halachas. You're not allowed to light a fire on Shabbos. It says in the Torah, Lo Sivaru Eish, it's one of the Lamates Malachis. So I may have thought that Yishari Le'Lemachar, if you're going to allow them to use these woods on Sunday, on Yom Tov, people will think the only reason that on Shabbos that you didn't let us use these woods is because you can't use woods on Shabbos, you can't burn on Shabbos. But Osi L'Meimah, they'll say, to B'yoymei, had these woods fallen off on Yom Tov, there would be no issue. There's no Issav Lo Sivaru Eish on Yom Tov. You're allowed to kindle a fire on Yom Tov if you need to, and Nami Shori, and it will be mutter. And the truth is, it won't be mutter, because if there were this wood to fall off on Yom Tov, there would be a problem with it, because it's similar to a Beitza Shenolda b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to use it that day. Ve'etmol, people will say that yesterday on Shabbos, Mishum Shabbos, the only reason it was asa is not because it came off the tree on Shabbos and it's like a Beitza Shenolda. People will think it's because of Lo Sivaru Eish. and then they won't realize that the same concern would apply to Yom Tov were the wood to have fallen off the tree on Yom Tov. And now the Gemara is continuing with another detail of woods that fell off the tree on Yom Tov. Omer of Masna. Eitzim shenoshru min adekel, woods, branches that fell off a tree, l'toich tanur, into an oven, b'Yom Tov on Yom Tov. What are you allowed to do? We know that you're not allowed to use their muktzah. It's like eitzim shenoshru is like beitza shenolda. On Yom Tov, you're not allowed to use it. The question is, it's now in the oven. What do we do? Says Rav Masna, marbe aleim eitzim muchonim. Take more woods, those woods that are not muktzah, woods that were already prepared from before Yom Tov and are not muktzah, and put them in the oven and be marbe. Make sure there's more woods in the oven, more branches and logs in the oven that are not muktzah than those that are muktzah. Umasikon, and then you can light the oven. That's what Rav Masna said. Asks the Gemara about Mahapich B'Yisura. When you churn the logs round and you move them from side to side, which is typical in an oven, then you're actually moving the muktzah, because those branches that fell off the tree are considered muktzah. Answers the Gemara, Kiven deruba dehatereninu, since most of the logs are mutter, it's considered bottle, it's nullified, the issa is nullified, and ki kamahapich behateru kamahapich, when you're turning over the woods, we consider it as if you're only turning over woods that are not muktzah, and it's okay. Asks the Gemara, v'hakamavatel isura lekatchila. We know there's a Mishnah in Masechet Beitza Daf from which we learn that ein mevatlin issa lekatchila. You're not allowed to go out of your way and do something to nullify an issa. If the issa became mixed into a majority, depending on what halachas we're talking about, 100, 200, 60, just a majority, whatever it might be, that once it becomes bottle, the issa is nullified. But to be mevatl it biyadayim, you're not allowed to do that. Over here, you've got muktzah in the oven, and we're telling him, add more logs and be mevatl the issa. You're not allowed to be mevatl issa lekatchila. Answers the Gemara, hanimili b'doiraisa. When there's an issa doiraisa, don't be mevatl it biyadayim. Avol b'dorabonon, mevatlin. But if it's only an issa d'Rabbanon, because it's only talking about muktzah, muktzah is an issa d'Rabbanon, you're allowed to be mevatel the issa b'yodayim. Asks the Gemara Rav Ashi that we already saw in Daf Daled Amud Aleph, the Omar kol dovo sheyesh le matirin, any issa that with the passage of time would become mutter, afilu b'drabbanon, even in isurim d'Rabbanon, loy bottle, the concept of bittul doesn't apply. Over here, where the whole problem is muktzah, because it's woods that fell off the tree on Yom Tov, wait till after Yom Tov, and then there's no issa to use them. There's no muktzah after Yom Tov, so why are you allowing us to use bittul on Yom Tov? How are you going to explain this? How can you, Rav Masna, allow us to resort to bittul and to nullify the issa of these woods? Answers the Gemara, when is it true that a dovosh yeshli matirin is something which we don't allow you to rely on the bittul, and we say, even if it's nisbatal, at the end of the day there's some issa here, there's an issa that would become mutter with the passage of time. Don't nullify the issa, don't view it as if it's mutter just because it's bottle, because there's a majority of heter. No, just view it as issa, because it's a shame to use something in issa when you can use it beheter. But that's only if when you're using it, it's still asa. But however, over here, when it comes to the woods, when you're actually benefiting from the woods, the heat of the woods, when you're in the oven, by that time, the issa has already been totally burnt up. You're not having direct benefit from the issa, because mikla koli, the woods are getting burnt up, and only from the wood and the heat from post-burning is what you're benefiting from. Kamakla koli isura, the issa is getting burnt up. In that case, that when you actually have benefit, the issa is no longer there. Over there, even Rav Ashi will agree that we can be mevatel it, and it's okay. So that was, we're coming back to what we saw at the beginning of the Amud. Rav's halacha number 1 was Yom Tov after Shabbos, or Shabbos after Yom Tov, where Rav said that noildo bezeh, asura bezeh, and Rava said we paskin like Rav, even though normally we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, who argues with Rav. And there it's a chumrah. Continues the Gemara, and now we're moving on to the second halacha of Rav. That Rava said the halacha was like him, and here it's going to be a kula. Shnei yomim toivim shel gol yois. We know that in Chutz La'aretz there are 2 days of Yom Tov. because in Chutz La'aretz, at least initially, they didn't know exactly when Rosh Chodesh was, they didn't know when the 15th of Nisan was, because they didn't know when the 1st of Nisan was, they didn't know if Adar had 29 days or 30 days, so they had to just always be machmir for 2 days. 2 days Sukkot, first day Sukkot, 2 days Shmini Atzeres, 2 days Pesach, 2 days Shvi Shel Pesach, 2 days Shavuos. They would have to have 2 days. So Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Kol Yos. Rav Omar Noil Do B'zeh Muteres B'zeh. Rav says that halacha of Beitza Shenoil Do B'Yom Tov, if an egg was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, on the second day of Yom Tov, you're allowed to have hana. You're allowed to. It's not muktzah. You're allowed to eat it. Rav Asi Omar Noil Do B'zeh Asura B'zeh. Rav Asi argued with Rav and said no, that a Beitza Shenoil Do B'Yom Tov, the first day, it's also even the second day. Asks the Gemara, Lema Kasava Rav Asi Kedusha Achasi. So can we assume that the reason that Rav Asi says it's also is because he sees the 2 days as a single one long day of Yom Tov? In Eretz Yisrael there's 1 day of 24 hours, and in Chutz La'aretz there's 1 day of 48 hours, because that was the Gzeira that the Chachamim said. Because the Chachamim said that in Chutz La'aretz you don't know exactly when the first day is, have a long first day of 48 hours. Is that the reason that Rav Asi says Noil Do B'zeh Asura B'zeh? Rav Asi Mavdil Miyom Tova Lechavrei. Rav Asi held that between the 2 days of Yom Tov you actually say a Havdalah. Well, if it's just one long day of 48 hours, you wouldn't be saying Havdalah in between. If it's 2 separate days, maybe one day, maybe the next day, then I can understand that you say Havdalah. So says the Gemara that the truth is Rav Asi Sfukei Musapkele. He wasn't sure whether it's one long day of 48 hours or 2 days of 24 hours. He had a suffix. So when it came to Havdalah, he would make Havdalah. And when it came to a Beitza Shenoiled on the first day, he would be machmir as if it's one long day, as of 48 hours. V'avid hacha l'chumra, v'hacha l'chumra. He was machmir on both sides. Omer Reb Zera. Reb Zera says, Kavosei de Rav Asi mistaber. It's probably like Rav Asi that Noil Do B'zeh Asura B'zeh. Why? I'll prove it to you. Dohidna. Nowadays, Yod'inon B'kriya Diyarcha. Today, because we have the Luach, and because we know the Chochmah of when Rosh Chodesh is in actual fact, with the Moiled, and we know all the whole Chochmah of the Kviyah, of the fixing of the months, and nonetheless, we have 2 days Yom Tov. Why do we have 2 days Yom Tov? If the only reason that Likatchila we had 2 days, because we weren't sure, is it this day, is it that day? Well, today you are sure. So just have 1 day. So it must be that no. The reason that we have 2 days is because the Chachamim were masaken that in Chutz La'aretz, where in the time when they didn't have the Chochmah of the Kriya Diyarcha, and they were relying on the Kiddush HaChodesh, they were relying on the Shluchei Beis Din, the agents of the Beis Din, to come round and tell us when Rosh Chodesh was, that today, the Chachamim decreed that we want you to have a 48-hour Yom Tov. And therefore, once the Chachamim said, have a 48-hour Yom Tov, don't take into account the Tzofik, we're creating a new essence of a 48-hour Yom Tov, and therefore we can understand that even today, that we know exactly when Rosh Chodesh is. The Chachamim said that in Chutz La'aretz, you have a 48-hour Yom Tov. You do that even when you know when Rosh Chodesh is. Omar Abai argued with the B'zeira and said, Kabosei de Rav mistaber. It's actually more probable like Rav, where Rav says, Noil Do B'zeh, Muteres B'zeh. And we actually assume that it's 2 separate days. There's no 2 days Yom Tov, there's just 1 day Yom Tov. Yeah, it's a suffix. You don't know, so you have to have 2 days. But when you do know, then you just keep the day that you know. Ditnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Boroshoinu at first, how would they tell everybody that when Rosh Chodesh was? They would get up on the high mountains, on the hills, they would light these big torches, these big fires, and then from one mountain to the next, from one hilltop to the next, they would see these torches and in turn light another torch, and that way, very quickly, everybody would know there's a torch, it was Rosh Chodesh. They would know exactly when Rosh Chodesh was. At some point, the Kutim, the Rishonim, they intended on confusing Klal Yisrael, so they would put torches up on the wrong day. Hiskinu sheyu shluchim yotzim. At that point, the Chachamim Masakin that agents are actually going to go around in person, shluchim Beis Din, and tell people, go from city to city and tell them when Rosh Chodesh was. And by the time it came to Yom Tov, the people who were close enough that the agents could get there within 2 weeks would know when Pesach was, when Sukkot was. So what do we see from here? V'ilu batlu hakutim, and when the kutim would no longer be a threat of dinon chad yoima, then they would go back to the one day when we know, if and when we know exactly when Rosh Chodesh is, we'll just keep the 1 day of Yom Tov. And also in the place where the agents actually arrived, of Dinon Chad Yoima, they would only keep 1 day Yom Tov because they knew exactly when Yom Tov was. So you see from there very clearly that it's not that the Chachamim said, keep 2 days because you don't know. No. Keep 1 day. If you don't know which day, you have to keep them both. But not that we are telling you that there is a 2-day Yom Tov. The Gemara says, okay, I understand that. But if so, nowadays where we know exactly when Yom Tov is, and we know when Rosh Chodesh is, my time of Dinon Trei Yoima. If so, nowadays, why are we keeping 2 days? Why are we not keeping just 1 day? According to what you, Rav, are saying, that the 2 days are 2 independent days that you have to follow each one because of a doubt. We don't have any doubts today. Answers the Gemara, Mishum Desholchu Mitam, because it was sent, a message was sent from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, saying even though you're going to, that you know when Rosh Chodesh is, keep 2 days. Not because the Chachamim stated initially that in Chutz La'aretz, that 1 day of Yom Tov is 48 hours long. No. Just because Minig Aviseichem B'Yadechem. Because since your fathers had that custom, because they didn't know, continue that custom. Why? Because Zimnin de Gozru Malchus Gzeira, sometimes the Malchus will make Gzeiras and people will forget. People won't be able to learn Torah. They won't be as wise as when they could learn more Torah. They won't know exactly when Rosh Chodesh is, and they'll get all confused. They'll say, just a minute, last year we only did 1 day Yom Tov. This year it's only 1 day Yom Tov. And people won't realize, last year you knew when Rosh Chodesh was. This year you don't know when Rosh Chodesh is. But also there'll be a big issue, a big problem with it. Therefore, they sent a message to Chutz La'aretz saying, even when you know when Rosh Chodesh is, because you're very wise and you know how the months are set up, nonetheless, keep the 2 days. Not because the original Gezerah was a 48-hour Yom Tov, but because originally we had to take precautions for the fact that we don't know which of the 1 day of 24 hours each, which day was Yom Tov. Keep 2 days. And here, this is the second halacha that Rav has said. The halacha is like Rav, that noilta b'zeh, muteres b'zeh. Because Rav says it's just one yom, it's one kedusha, not 2 kedushas, and therefore, since it's not one long day, it's 2 separate days. We have to be machmir for both, because either one we have to assume could be Yom Tov, but we know that only one of them are Yom Tov, not both, and therefore noilta b'zeh, muteres b'zeh. An egg which was born, which was laid on the first day of Yom Tov, then of course you are allowed to use it and eat it on the second day of Yom Tov, because only one of these 2 days is Yom Tov. If the first day is Yom Tov, the second day is weekday. No problem. Enjoy the egg. If the first day was a weekday, then it was laid on a weekday. There's no problem. You can enjoy it on Yom Tov. In the Yitzchok Hashem in the next shiur, we're going to learn the third halacha of Rav.